Thank you for your purchase of the Ez-Vex Sharpening System. At this time, we'd like to show you the system that we're presently using here at the Clipper Shack to sharpen the shears on our system. You're going to see a lot of steps here that we do, and you may decide to change this system up, do what works for you. There's a lot of different ways to achieve the same goal. Our goal is to have a sharp shear for the stylist. The first thing I'd like to tell you is when you go into a shop and you're there, talk to the stylist. Don't just take the shears, go, run the same process on every shear. Discuss how the stylist uses that shear. Does she slide cut? Does she tip cut? A lot of times stylists have different shears for different purposes. Find out the purpose she's using that shear for. The second thing you will do, once you've talked to your stylist, you will inspect your shear. When inspecting the shear, you're going to look for nicks, cracks. Was it a convex shear and now it's a beveled shear? Was it a beveled shear and someone put a convex on it? You'll see a lot of different things in the field. You'll also be looking for nicks up and down the blade, as well as do the tips come together? Do the tips cross too much? There's a lot of different things you have to look for in the inspection of the shear. The shear I've got laying here, the first thing you notice is the tips cross. They cross over each other, they go too far, and so when that happens, the first thing you look for is the bumper or silencer, whatever you choose to call it. It's missing on this shear. So the first thing you say to yourself is the silencer needs replaced. The next thing you're going to do, you're going to open and close the shear slowly. Feel the shear. Do you feel any rough spots, nicks, anything in this shear that needs to be addressed? This particular shear, right at this point, there's a slight catch in that shear, and we'll look closer, but there's obviously a small nick right at that point, and you feel it as you close the shear. That will have to be addressed in the sharpening. The next thing you do after inspecting the shear is you test the shear. Find out where any problems in the cut are. We test both on paper towels and we test on rabbit fur. These both give you a pretty good idea of how the shear is cutting before you start. We'll start with the paper towel. You just take a piece of paper towel. We like to use Viva. It's a good, more like a cloth paper towel. And we start clear at the back. And as you can see, it did not cut. We'll try it again. Does not cut. We also try it on fur. It's a real fine fur, on the rabbit fur. And it cuts in back. We'll try it back. It cuts. Try it at the tips. It folds. You can see it, it's not cutting the fur, it's folding the fur. Okay, now that you've tested that shear, you've talked to your stylist, you've inspected it, you need to disassemble your shear. Now I'll show you this shear as well as a couple more as we go through this so that you will be able to see several different types of shears and how to disassemble them. On this particular shear, you'll notice there's a tension knob on the top. Underneath it is a tension plate. And when you look at the back side, it's simply a stud, a blank head. So, what you do to disassemble these shears, I'm going to loosen the tension knob. When I do this, I'm going to place my finger over the stud so that it doesn't fall out of the back of the shear when I'm disassembling. I remove the tension knob, and what I like to do to get in the habit of doing is line everything up in the order in which it came off of the shear. The first thing was I removed the tension knob. Now the tension plate. The next thing that comes off is actually the blade. It would be the finger blade. Then the next thing I have to do is remove the stud. When I remove that stud, it fell out. Make sure 90% of the time there is a small washer on that screw. I don't know if you can see it, it's hanging on the screw. But a lot of times this small washer will stick inside the hole in the shear. I always take the screw and always try inside that hole to see if anything else will come out. Then I place this blade down and I leave the washer on the screw and I set it down on the stud. That way I've got all my parts in order and I will be ready to make the plan for sharpening. Now, I suggest in the field you only take apart one shear at a time. Get that shear apart, get it sharpened, reassemble it before the next shear is taken apart. You don't want to mix up parts and be sitting there trying to decide what washer went with what shear. Trust me, I've been there. It's not a good feeling. What I'll show you now is a pair of scissor pliers, because this particular shear that I've got out now is a split screw type shear. What a split screw is, on the one side you've got a normal screw head. When you turn your shear over, you have what looks like a very small screw head on the opposite side. It's actually not a screw head. There is actually a slit cut into that screw and it's spread just slightly. What this does is keep tension on the screw so that it won't back off when the shears are moved in and out in a scissor action. I'll now loosen the screw. If you use the scissor pliers, you just lock them in and you can loosen the screw. Once the screw is loosened with the scissor plier, and it actually has a ratchet on it, so you tighten and you move the screw, then you loosen your grip and you can ratchet the pliers back, you can move forward. When you feel the screw is loose enough, you can get just your regular screwdriver it'd be great if I could see, and we loosen the screw. Once again, we look under the screw for a washer. We remove, make sure nothing stayed in the hole. Excuse me. And there is a small washer on the screw. I always leave it sit on the screw. Okay, now here is a different type of fastening system for the shear. When you look at it, it has what looks like a tension knob, but it's recessed, and it just has two small slits in the screw, and these shears generally come with a key. However, most of the stylists lose the key and they have no way of adjusting their shear. The one side is just a blank stud. The other side, that's actually a nut that sets down in, and it's got two small slots in it, and you can buy specialty tools for that. But what I use, I actually took a pair of needle nose pliers and made small screwdriver tips on each of the blades. This way I can adjust it in and out to fit any of the types that I find in the field. What you do is place your finger on the stud in back. Then you can use your tool, put it into the two little slots, and you loosen the nut. Once the nut is loose enough, you can get a hold of them with your fingers and finish bringing the nut out. Once again, when this comes off, then I will be looking for parts. Because on this particular pair, I've removed the tension nut. I place it down. There is a second tension plate that sets down in the hole on this particular screw. And it came out. Now, you want to look at that tension plate, because on one side of the tension plate, I'm sure this is too small, you have an actual bump that sticks up. On the back side of the same tension plate, there is an indentation. The bump on this little washer sticks up, and it fits into the knurl on the bottom of the tension screw. Now, I'll move that to the side, keeping them all in order so I know how they came apart. The next thing I'm going to do is remove the stud. I'll lift the blade off of the stud, set it in order. Now, the stud comes out and there's no washer. So what I'll do now, if you can see, there is a washer. I've got it swinging on the end of the screw. It is a small white washer, and it's actually cupped so that it fits up onto the head of the screw. I always leave it on the screw. I let it fall back down onto the screw, and it stays on the screw. I place it to the side, sitting up on my towel, so that I do not lose it. Once again, this was only a demonstration to show you how to disassemble the shears and to keep things in the proper order. I highly suggest, when in the field, never take 3 pairs of shears apart and intermix the parts. Too much chance of something getting lost. Do 1 shear at a time, complete it, then move on. Now back to the original shear that we inspected and tried to cut with. We've got it all laid out in order the way we disassembled it. Now we continue on with a little bit more of the inspection. We want to make sure if we can see or feel the nick. You can run your fingernail down it and I can feel the slight nick. We look at the ride, which comes around the inside. It's like a backwards J on a right-handed shear. And if you look down the ride, a lot of times you can see the shiny spot where the nick has crossed over. We can feel it. We know the nick is there. We inspect the other blade. Same thing. We come across, we can run the back of our fingernail down it very lightly. We don't want to slice our fingers. So as you run your fingernail down, you can feel there's just a slight series of small nicks that I can feel with my fingernail. So as I form my plan of attack, I realized the tips were very dull. The last third of the shear was extremely dull. It folded the paper towel as well as folding the hair when we tested. I'm going to form my plan for this shear. And each shear will have a different plan. This particular shear is in rough condition. It's got several nicks. It was very dull at the tip. So what I will do when we start the sharpening process, I will start with a 30 micron diamond wheel. I will follow that up with a 15 micron diamond wheel, followed by the 9.5 micron